Hello, welcome to the Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. Hey, there's going to be a proper introduction to this podcast in a minute, but before we get to that, I just want to tell you that if you want to help us make these podcasts, we've got a new subscription system that you can help us with. You can still use the badges, gofasterstripe.com/badges. That's £1 a month or whatever you want a month, but we've got this new drip page, which is done by Kickstarter. It costs £3 a month. If you sign up early, you're a founder member and get some extra benefits, but you get all the backstage interviews from that we've ever done and all the ones to come from that we do 5 minutes back there. And you get access to my stand-up shows released once every couple of months. You get to do a Q&A session with me every now and again. There's lots of little benefits and extra stuff to do there. Plus, your money will go to making new podcast. So, and you can get entered into a draw to win the Lannister notebook if you join within the first month. So if you want to do that, go to d.rip/Richard-Herring and you can see what all the fuss is about. Anyway, let's see what my other introduction is going to be and listen to that as well. Hello, welcome to yet another edition of Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. My guests this week are Geoff Lloyd, kind of guy you'd expect to be on this, and Ed Miliband. What are they doing together? They're off of the Labour Party in the Stone and eating a bacon sandwich. What? Anyway, if you want to help support our ventures, why not buy one of our 2 emergency questions books at gofasterstripe.com. You can get the original emergency questions book, beautiful Christmas gift. But an even better Christmas gift, surely, is Christmas emergency questions with over 275 Christmas questions and 225 just regular questions you can ask at any time of the years, because emergency questions are for life, not just for Christmas. Even Christmas emergency questions isn't just for Christmas, though it might be weird if you're bandying around too much after Christmas. Wait till October at least until you start to get out again. Anyway, why not sit back, relax? It's recommended by Ed Miliband in this podcast. Why not sit back, relax, and enjoy? Why don't you buy a ticket to see me on tour, richardherring.com/gigs, and sit back and enjoy me talking to the closest I've ever got to interviewing the Prime Minister of this country and Geoff Lloyd at the same time. What's going on with that? It's Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leicester Square Theatre. Please welcome a man who is at this very moment transforming like a caterpillar into a show business butterfly. It's Richard Herring! Thank you very much. Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome to Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. Though I was hanging out with the puppets from the Herbs today, who've recently been rediscovered in a box. Come on, many of you are old enough to know what that actually is. They call it rehearsal, so I don't know if that's going to catch on. Yeah, I've had quite a week. I live in a small village in Hertfordshire now. It makes it very difficult to come in to London. I've got a dog. I was walking the dog late at night, and I go past this pub, and there's usually some men smoking outside there, and there was 2 men quite portly men dressed in dart uniforms. They were playing darts in the pub. They saw me coming up, and one went, "Fuck me, I thought you were Noel Edmonds." I know I'm quite short. I've shaved my beard off because I went home and shaved my beard off immediately. And I do believe that a small box can cure cancer. But apart from that, I think that is unfair. And I just went, "Oh, thanks a lot, mate," or something like that. That was my witty comeback. Though when I was a minute down the road, I thought I should have said, "Fuck me, I thought it was Mr. Blobby." And that would have been... worked well. My dog, who I mentioned there, is a bit crazy. She's a puppy. And last week I was talking about my reading glasses, and my dog this week ate my posh reading glasses and my sunglasses. In one fell swoop, it ate them both, destroyed both pairs. Like, it was about £600 worth of damage done. And it seems like a war against my eyes for some reason. It's trying to stop me seeing things, but then also be able to see things in the sunshine. I don't know. Don't know what my dog's doing. And we went to the fireworks display last night. My daughter, who I mentioned sometimes, she's 2 3/4. She was very excited to go, but the minute it started, she started crying, and we had to leave straight away. Which, to be honest, she said too loud. Too loud, my ears hurt, which is fair. It is very loud, and I was quite glad because it had been really difficult parking on the way in. I thought it's going to be a bugger to get out, but we were the first out. And I've seen fireworks before, and to be honest, they're shit. So it was. Thank you to my daughter there. It's good they can tell. My son is a month old now, and he can't talk at all. It's very difficult to understand. He'll cry, and you go, "What's wrong?" Just say what it is. And he won't say. Just, go yeah. I mean, it's usually. I want milk or I've done a poo, or I need to burp, but, that takes some scrolling through to get there. So, anyway, we're going to move on because we've got 2 fantastic guests to kick us off this week. You're much better than last week's audience. Oh, shit. One of my guests is probably best known as the chairman of Her Majesty Treasury's Council of Economic Advisors. Pretty proud, pretty pleased about that. And my other guest is probably best known as the safe word of Collins and Herring in the Collins and Herring podcast. It's Ed. It's the unlikely pairing of Ed Miliband and Geoff Lloyd, ladies and gentlemen. I hope they're here. Here they are. That's Geoff Lloyd. Ed Miliband. He's got Poppy on. Even though it's December. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is very exciting for me because this is the closest we've ever been to having the Prime Minister on this. It's close.
Yeah, why don't you rub it in?
Yeah. Can
I leave now?
I was talking about Geoff.
Oh, right.
You never know, Geoff. You keep that dream going. If it can work for Donald Trump, it can work for you. So, it's an amazing honour to have you on. I'm glad you managed to locate a pin for your poppy.
I did, thank you.
It looks very... You didn't bother wearing a poppy?
No, but neither did you.
Do you hate the war veterans?
Do you hate them?
I've got my poppy at home on the shelf.
You love them that much, you keep it on a shelf.
I do, I have respect for them. Look, why are you two here together?
Why are we here?
Why are you two friends?
I'm here because you would never have me on in my own right.
Right.
So I've had to latch on to Ed to
Yeah.
get onto this podcast. After years of being overlooked by my more successful contemporaries and friends.
That's good, that is true.
Yes,
So,
I know.
I thought I might have you on one time on
The extra one.
a sort of desperate week.
Yeah.
But then, so you do a podcast together.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about?
So we met in 2015 when I was running to be Prime Minister, and Geoff...
How did that go, running to be Prime
Not
Minister?
so well. Thanks for reminding me. So Geoff did an interview with me, and people said I sounded nearly human.
Yes.
And
I did for Ed what Jimmy Fallon did for Donald Trump. Okay. Ruffle the hair.
and so then after the... thanks very much. Early this year, Geoff came to me and said, I think there aren't enough people talking about interesting ideas to make people cheerful about the world. Okay. So it's called Reasons to be Cheerful, our podcast, available on all good podcast apps, downloadable.
God, how the mighty have fallen.
Would you...
I thought it was bad enough I used to have a BBC Two show and now I'm doing this.
And so anyway, that's how it happened.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, because
Well,
you've done a little bit of broadcasting more recently. You stood in for Jeremy Vine.
Yes, I did.
Which must have been unusual for the listeners of the Jeremy Vine show to have someone a little bit to the left of Jeremy Vine, I would say.
Yeah, although you were sort of instructed not to bring your politics into the, studio.
I wish someone would instruct him not to do that.
You were road testing toilets on the Jeremy Vine
I was.
Show. Yeah.
I was Victorian toilets versus modern toilets.
Okay.
In terms of sort of how low, how the mighty have fallen, that was a kind of, sort of, I kind of debate. As they discussed doing this, I thought this is really kind of Do I really want to be doing this?
But we record the podcast at my house, and we've been talking about this for a while. And
Geoff has a toilet.
I happened to mention that I was given one of these Japanese toilets.
Okay. These ones that sort of talk to you and sing.
They talk to you, but more pertinently, they have various sprays.
So they spray your bottom.
Yeah. And the second I mentioned that, Ed was, can we do it at your house? Could we record it?
I've never used the. Well, I haven't. I've sort of used the toilet, but not sort of the spray.
You're working your way up to
Yeah. Well, it's in quite a sort of enclosed space, so you don't really.
We record in the next room, and I think Ed is worried about us overhearing his activities.
Save a bit up, have a few drinks, and some baked beans for you.
Good advice. Good advice. Anyway, they're more hygienic apparently.
Are they? How does the toilet work out for you?
Very well. I mean, you could eat your dinner off backside.
Off your backside?
Yeah.
I may do later. Yes. I quite like the idea. So they're a bidet and a toilet combined, sort of, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it sits on. It's a
talk
seat
about this.
that
Let's
sits
just talk
onto
about this.
It sits on top of your existing toilet.
Okay.
There's a remote control on the wall,
Yeah.
and you can have a preset for yourself, a preset for your wife, or whoever you cohabit with.
Yeah.
Just to get the angle of the jet just right.
So it's a bit like in the car when the seat remembers where.
Exactly that. Yes. Yeah.
We're giving so much free advertising to this Japanese toilet company. Should we not get them to sponsor us?
Well, we haven't mentioned the name yet.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay,
We're holding out
for
the money. I mean, maybe they would give you a toilet.
Yeah, maybe they would.
Are you worried about the toilet kind of becoming sentient and trying to overthrow you in the middle of? That must be a worry.
Yeah.
Kind of robotic toilet.
Yes.
It's a very good podcast. I've listened to the first couple, and
There are like 7 of them.
there are a lot. I haven't got all day. I had to research Greg Jenner as well. I did half an hour on both of you, and you should be pleased, as you'll find out. There's 3 of you this week. It's made it much more difficult. I like the idea. So in the first one, you talk about that I think a very interesting idea
Universal
of
basic
everyone getting a universal pay.
So that's basically, you get rid of welfare as we know it, and you give everybody a flat amount, which doesn't depend on your income, and doesn't depend on whether you're being interviewed 17 times by the job centre in a week and all of that stuff. Yeah. And oddly enough, it's an idea that was first mentioned by Thomas Paine, who was the radical pamphleteer of the 17-somethings.
Where does this idea that you're geeky come from?
Yeah, but it's been embraced at different times by left and right. So Richard Nixon piloted it in the US. It's embraced by some of the tech people, Mark Zuckerberg and so on. It's embraced on the left because it's sort of an answer to inequality, welfare and so on. So we talked about that. It's an interesting idea.
Do you reckon you could get that through? You're in Parliament, you could get that through?
Well, look, I think the good thing about the podcast is, and this is a sort of change from me before 2015, is you don't have to be thinking, here are the sort of 17 reasons why this might not work politically. You can think, is this a good idea? Should we be talking about it? Yeah. We did drug decriminalisation last week, so we can do subjects that are, off the map politically.
Sure. Well, that's kind of interesting. I think we'll probably. I was going to come to that later, but especially when you're the leader of a party, you have to be very careful about everything you're saying, and everything's a photo opportunity, and every moment can be you're telling me backstage about something that could be taken out of context.
So Ed was on Nick Robinson's podcast. Nick Robinson says to Ed, "What was that catchphrase that Arnold Schwarzenegger had in The Terminator?" To which you replied perfectly innocently,
"I'll be back."
And then the headline the next day is, Ed Miliband says, "I'll be back to frontline politics."
Geoff rang me up and said, "That seems really unfair."
Yeah.
I said, no, that's the way it is, really. Look, you feel if you're leader of the opposition that you are operating in a political war zone, particularly if you're the leader of the Labour Party. And in a way, one of the most annoying things people say to me on Twitter when I do half funny tweets is, "Oh, why weren't you like that before 2015?" So if you're one of those people, don't do it again. I got the message. I've obviously thought a lot about that since people say that a lot. No doubt, I take some responsibility for not, being as free as you can be doing that job. But the context is all. Yeah. And you have to, that if you say one word out of place, the Daily Mail's going to run a front page story and it'll run for 3 days and, all of that. And but so then, now it shouldn't make you overly cautious, but it probably did.
I mean, but the people who read the Daily Mail are not going to vote for you anyway, are they?
I'm not sure that's true of everybody. And and look, in a way, this comes up because one of the things I'm doing as a backbencher is campaigning against Rupert Murdoch's attempt to take over Sky News. So he owns 39%, he wants to own 100%. And one of the things we're trying to convince the authorities of is the people who are making this decision is it matters what's on the Sun front page, it matters what's on the Mail front page, because it informs the BBC, ITV, lots of the other things, lots of the other news that is made. So, I wish it was completely irrelevant, but I don't think it is completely irrelevant.
No, but then Donald Trump's come along and just said everything that pops into his head, and people seem to like. And is the reason
correct, but with a big right-wing journalistic ecosystem behind him. It's really important. This Fox News created Donald Trump. Fox News. Shamefully. It's an extraordinary thing. Sorry to be serious for a second, but so people know Robert Mueller is filing charges against some of Donald Trump's acolytes. He's a special prosecutor that's been brought in about this whole Russia collusion connection and all that. And what's so interesting about Murdoch and his influence and this right-wing ecosystem is, Fox News is saying this is all terrible and the guy should be sacked, Robert Mueller. The New York Post, owned by Murdoch, is saying it, right? But the Wall Street Journal, which was up to now considered a respectable paper or semi-respectable paper, is also saying it.
Yeah.
And that is the right-wing ecosystem. Now, we don't have it in the same way here, but we have it in a different way, I would say.
Yeah. But maybe people are getting... I think part of the issue is people are getting wise to journalists lying, and so that you're able to say it's fake news, and they're getting wise to politicians lying, so then they just think everything's a lie. So, it's almost been built...
And look, I think to give Jeremy Corbyn credit, I think what he did better in 2017, certainly than I did, was to find other ways round them. Yeah. Finding other ways to communicate with people.
Than a big stone.
Than a big stone. I was wondering when you were going to bring it up.
For Christmas, we're having it broken up and we're going to give away pieces of it on the podcast.
Definitely. Auction.
Like pieces of the Berlin Wall.
An auction. Yeah. An auction.
Do you know where it is?
Do I still have the
Do you
stone?
know where it is?
No, I don't know.
You should find it.
Broken up for
like Jimmy Savile's grave. It's been broken up.
I've promised Ed that I will deflect any unsavoury comments.
Leap in front of me.
Just saying, that's just a fact.
If you're going to tweet about this, mention that Ed had a very neutral expression during anything unsavoury.
Exactly.
I would definitely keep it if I had it.
This is the Ed Stone.
I'll try and find it. I'll try and find it for you.
Well, it would be nice. You could have it as a kitchen, top of your
accessory.
kitchen cabinet. Wouldn't it? But that'd be a nice slate to have on the top. Because did it cost £30,000?
No, I didn't.
That's what it says.
Less.
Jeez, Richard, you've gone so middle class since you moved to the countryside. It'd be a lovely work surface in my kitchen.
And it's 30 grand. You'd probably get it now for about 1,000. So you were in Absolute Radio for a long time, and then you stopped working for Absolute Radio. What happened there? That was the big news.
It was just to be like Ed and to be serious for a second.
Yeah.
It was affecting my mental health adversely. No, I was really miserable, and also I fancied trying a few different things.
Sure.
One of which was podcasting.
Yeah.
And I do this other podcast with Annabelle that I used to do, the Absolute Show, which is about being a socially inept human being, and it's a show for other socially inept human beings.
Yes.
And then I do this podcast with Ed, who, as you can see, is in no way socially inept. He's very apt. Yeah.
It's you had proper big. You had Ed on that show, which you had proper big names, not like me getting Geoff Lloyd. You had Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Did you try and get Paul McCartney on the podcast first before Ed Miliband?
He tried a lot of people before me,
Ed was
you
making
me.
fun of me because last Thursday, we record on a Thursday, and I was invited to a meat-free Monday party by the McCartney family. And Ed said, when exactly were you invited? And I worked it out, and it was less than 48 hours beforehand.
Right.
Which makes me think that maybe I wasn't very high up the guest list. It's slightly longer than the notice you gave me, but not very, very much.
I left it late this week, but it's worked out well.
Yeah,
it has worked out very well.
Who said no before you asked us?
I didn't ask that many people. I was hanging on because Charlie Brooker said he would want to do one,
right.
so I was keeping dates open. And then he never got back to me. Russell Brand was a possible for this week.
He was on a pencil.
Oh.
Yeah. Would have been nice, wouldn't it?
I would have liked that.
Do you wish you'd done this podcast rather than his podcast just before the election?
It wasn't his podcast, actually.
What was it? It was his...
Well, whatever it was.
Well, it sort of is a podcast.
Yeah. No, I think it was worse for him than it was for me, actually.
Maybe.
He sort of took some time to recover from it.
Yeah. Well, he was going through a phase where he thought there was going to be revolution imminently, I think, which, is sort of almost been proven right. 100 years since the Russian Revolution. I think it might be coming, but...
the time is...
Yeah, slowly.
Well, we're today, as we're speaking, which is in the past for you at home, but all the offshore accounts coming through and finding out that Mrs Brown's Boys, the mine of people in... fuck.
How do you feel when you see your comedy contemporaries listed in those things?
Yeah.
Envious? Deeply envious?
Well, I'm surprised that they... I'm surprised they don't... I'm surprised that someone like Jimmy Carr, I'm surprised that he... Well, maybe not so much with him, but... I'm surprised that they're not paying their tax, That's quite... most comedians are quite left-wing, as I'm constantly told. I think I sort of... somewhere in the middle, really, but that's quite unusual. I think they would want to pay their taxes. But Lewis Hamilton didn't pay his VAT on his private jet, but he surely owns enough to get his VAT back on stuff. He must be in the VAT bracket by now. That
you're suggesting he's registered, so he would be able to claim the VAT on a private. Yeah.
He must have had. Must be something more than that. But no, I don't. I don't do this for money. As Mrs Brown's Boys got 1,000 DVDs of their own in their garage, probably. But anyway,
you must be in that bracket with the emergency questions.
I am,
right
yeah.
now, though.
Yeah. I sell
Christmas one coming out as well.
There's a Christmas one, that's right, Ed. I said he could have a free one if he mentioned it.
Thanks so much.
We're going to have a sticker on the front as recommended.
Yeah.
But do you think there was because you actually, it was like many of the things that in the last 2 or 3 years, we all went to bed thinking one thing was going to happen, and then we woke up and a different thing had happened. And nearly every vote over the last 5 or 6 years has been a sort of 50.
I didn't go to bed, actually.
Well, I don't suppose you did. I'm pretty confident. I'll just put on my Prime Minister badge and go to sleep. Nothing can possibly go wrong. And when I wake up, I'll nuke the world.
Had you spoken to a removal firm?
I had not. No, I hadn't. No, I was quite... didn't want to tempt fate. Look,
you should have tempted fate.
You should have tempted it.
What's the question?
What do you think? Because it looked like it was going to happen. Do you think there was one thing that was...
No, there's not one thing. I really don't think there's one thing. It's a sort of... Look, Hilary Benn said to me that after the election, he said that his mum always used to say that there were 2 types of elections. There were time for a change elections, and there were steady as she goes elections. And that this election had been sort of tipping between... 2015 had been tipping between the two. Yeah. And just at the end, in the last period, it tipped towards more people wanting steady as she goes for a whole host of reasons.
Yeah.
And I think 2017 was different. And partly it was different because Jeremy found a way through that I didn't, and it was partly different because the context had changed, 2 more years of austerity, Brexit, all of that had galvanised people, I think.
Yeah. Well, but Cameron said if, vote for Miliband and chaos of the country. Yeah.
Competent, what was it?
Do you think it could have been more chaotic?
I can't now remember the tweet, sort of 5 years of chaos with Ed Miliband or competence.
Or 2
stability
years
and
of chaos
competence
with the Conservatives. And then the end of civilization.
It hasn't worked out well, really, has it?
But you're now, you're Remain, but now you're on your website I saw you saying we have to go through with Brexit.
Well, I think people voted for it. And,
did they, though? They voted for... They did a yes/no question, but it didn't say what that would involve. It didn't say what that would mean. And so...
But it goes to your point about revolution, actually, funnily enough, which is, look, my constituency was 72% Leave, Doncaster North, top 5 or 6 in the country. And people didn't just vote because of immigration, Europe, the things people know about. They voted because they wanted change. And I'm afraid the terrible thing that Cameron did was that he turned what was an issue that probably 15 or 20% of the population cared about, Europe, into one that 75 or 80% of the country now feel attached to one side or the other. I mean, the idea that, remember this referendum? It was a referendum. It was supposed to heal the divisions in the country. I mean, the idea, that didn't work out.
No.
And the trouble is that the people who say, oh, it's easy, you should just reverse it because people were lied to about the NHS and all of that stuff. Yes, they were, but there is something deeper at the root of this, and it was basically people saying politics hasn't taken any notice of us, politics hasn't listened to us, and if the response of politics to that is, the first response is, well, now we're going to ignore you, that is not a good thing. Look, my son said to me, actually, who's admittedly is 6, about to be 7, he said to me, I said to him, there's people calling for a second referendum, and he said, well, what happens if it goes the other way? Is it going to be best of 3? And actually, I thought it was quite a good point. It's not straightforward, this. I know people think it's straightforward if you're a Remainer. And the thing I say to people who are Remainers or Leavers is go out and meet some people who are for the other side. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's part of the problem, is that we're too divided as a country.
But we are. But as you say, we've been divided by something that probably most people didn't massively care about either way, and it's been created. But I just sort of think, does democracy work to the extent that if you know something is going to, or something seems like it's going to damage the country,
I know.
and all the people who voted for it, and that most of the people who voted for it aren't going to get what they wanted because some of them thought they were voting for Muslims to leave. People were saying, well, the Muslims will be leaving tomorrow. That's not what we voted on.
But honestly, Richard, most people in my constituency were not voting because they thought the Muslims were leaving tomorrow. I really want to say this to you. They were voting for deep reasons that we have a country that is not serving them, that is too unequal, the way their wages are stuck, where they're worried about their kids. People who are Remainers would recognise this. And it is really important. It's a bit like the Trump thing. I think Trump's awful as an absolute moron, as I said in one of my tweets about him. But you've got to go to the deep reasons for it. Yeah. Because if you just say, oh well, people are just racists or people were just lied to, it's just inadequate as an understanding of it.
I agree.
The first step to solving the division is to understand where people are coming from.
Sure. But had it gone the other way, would you have just gone, oh, we won, bad luck, shut up?
Totally.
Totally.
You wouldn't. Look, come on. If it'd been 52-48 and we'd been sitting on this stage, you wouldn't have been saying, "Come on, Ed, Nigel Farage has really got a point. We've got to rerun this referendum."
I think there's a massive problem at the heart of the democracy we have in our country. And in fact, before
I think that's what we call a politician's answer to my question.
When the general election that the general election that the UKIP got 25% of the vote and no seats.
The thing you say is, I'm really glad you asked that question, Ed. And then you say something completely irrelevant to my question. That's the technique.
I'm not a fan of Nigel Farage, but I don't think it's fair that UKIP are unrepresented in Parliament.
You're not answering my question.
When there's that's just the start.
Mr. Herring, I'm going to ask you the question again. If it had been 52-48 the other way, what would you be saying?
I think it would have been insane to say, bad luck, fuck off. I think you'd have to go, look, there's nearly half of the people...
But you wouldn't have been saying rerun the referendum.
I wouldn't be going, bad luck, we won, shut up.
Would you be saying rerun the referendum?
I wouldn't necessarily we, because, there's a lot of Remainers I don't like. I think you'd have to take into account. What I don't like is people going, 17 million people voted to leave, and you've got to go, yeah, there's 16 million voted to stay. And so you're just ignoring...
I think the way that they've handled it is absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Because, Theresa May has said at various points, we need to speak for the 100%, but she's shown no inclination to speak for the 100%.
No, exactly.
She's only shown an inclination to speak for the 52%. And I think that is terrible. So I think you've got to... But, the other thing is, and this is where the thing my son said is right, we've got to live together as a country after this.
Sure.
Whatever the final resolution of it. And I think that's sort of what people don't kind of underestimate. Mind you, look, I'm deeply worried about some of the implications of this.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to sit back and wait for it all to go wrong and then go... Shall we go back, guys? We're going to have to take the euro now. We really fucked up. I think it is. I sort of feel that the Parliament just feel, and I think this is why young people are getting more into voting, which is a good thing. It just feels so archaic and ridiculous, and you have those debates, and people are filibustering, and so 16-year-olds can't vote, and everyone's still all the it's like the private school debating society, and it just sort of feels like we should, sell off the Houses of Parliament.
Good idea.
Put a hotel in there, make some money off it, and build a Parliament.
Sell your book. Sell your Christmas book.
But it doesn't feel like a modern Parliament.
No,
it feels like a sort of, it's an archaic system and an archaic institution.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly off-putting, and the most off-putting thing of all is Prime Minister's question.
We had Ed. Do you know Aisha Hazarika, comedian who used to work for Ed? We had her on the podcast talking about coaching Ed for Prime Minister's Question Time, and it was painful to listen. Yeah, painful for her that she would have to sort of coach you out of the toilet afterwards. You'd be in the fetal position.
Exactly.
And you say that's the best thing about
the most blissful thing about not being the leader of the opposition is not having to do Prime Minister's questions.
Sure.
Oh. I wake up every Wednesday and think, yes, I don't have to do Prime Minister's questions. But I mean, there's something awful about Prime Minister's questions, which is I don't think it benefits anybody. I mean, I don't think it benefits the Prime Minister. I don't think it benefits the leader of the opposition. I don't think it benefits Parliament. It's just it's good. The only good thing you can say about it is if Donald Trump had to do Prime Minister's questions, I mean, he'd have to resign because presumably because he's completely useless and couldn't answer any questions. Or maybe he wouldn't care. But so at least the Prime Minister's held to account.
Yeah.
That's the best you can say about it.
But it's not about giving a good answer, it's about who's got the best zinger.
I know.
And the standard of comedy in the House of Commons is poor.
It's a low bar.
I have to say.
It's definitely a low bar.
And Theresa May is the worst one at doing it. Do you think we could? If I would say build Houses of Parliament in the Midlands or like the middle of the country.
Well, the Parliament's going to have to move out. I don't think you should. I think we could move to Birmingham or somewhere else just to give a different focus to the whole sort of the whole parliamentary thing.
Yeah. Have some flats that people can live in if they want to, attached to the Parliament. They don't get any second homes.
Like dorms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe.
Nice.
Maybe.
Right, well,
one other thing I'll say about this, right, because you say it's all, terrible and Parliament's a sort of nightmare and all that's true.
Only there was something the people who work there could do about it.
I do say this, that individually, Parliament is much better than collectively, in the sense of the people who go into it from different sides, I'm not just talking about Labour people, tend to go into it for the right reasons. I mean, I know that sounds like it's an unfashionable thing to say, but I genuinely do believe that. The Tories who I vehemently disagree with and I hate what they've done to the country and all of that, but actually, they're motivated by what they believe. Mm-hmm. And that is an important thing to remember.
Yeah, but then it's just sort of that, and I think there are loads of fantastic. I agree. I think there are loads of fantastic politicians and people who are trying to affect a difference in the world. But then, if you can't make that difference, we're bogged down with doing something self-destructive anyway. But if you can't make those decisions, and if there's ways of filibustering and
I agree.
ruining stuff like that, it's just insane. It's
people may not know about it. Did people know about this votes at 16 thing? So we were supposed to be talking about votes at 16 on Friday, and basically, I think basically what the Tories did. This is not a bill by the government; it's a bill by an individual backbencher, and basically the way the Tories organised it, they just basically stopped it being voted on, even though there might have been a majority to keep it going and get it through and all that.
I feel awful. I feel like I misrepresented this podcast to Eddie. He says, they're not going to ask about Brexit and stuff. I said, no, it's going to be all about whether you've sucked your own cock or not. And I feel this is a terrible misrepresentation.
To be fair, I was going to say, we got someone very important. It'd be awful to waste this by asking those sort of stupid questions. So I want to ask proper.
Yeah.
So Ed Miliband, I wouldn't ask about that. You could have been Prime Minister. It's disgraceful. But have some respect. If you were in a human centipede, you had to be. No, wait. With two other politicians, it's still a political question. But you can choose who the other. Do you know what a human centipede is, Ed?
I'm going to try and deflect this with a pun. Surely it would be a millipede if Ed was involved.
Okay. So we need a 999 politician. It doesn't work like that, does it?
Yeah.
I won't ask you that. I'll ask you an emergency question. I'll pick one at random. Well, I'll ask you this. This is a very old school one that does link a little bit. That you can have that.
Thank you so much. I might you to sign it. Right, go on.
If you had to choose between having a hand made out of ham or an armpit that dispenses sun cream, which of those things would you choose?
God, neither. I don't know.
You have to choose. This is why you could never be Prime Minister.
Listen, mate.
I asked her reason, mate. She was straight in.
Given your answers on the Brexit referendum, I'm taking no lectures from you about not answering the question. Geoff, what's your answer?
Oh, I would like a hand made out of ham because I'm a vegetarian, so I don't get to enjoy ham, but I can nibble on my own hand.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad as a vegetarian you've made that distinction, because some vegetarians won't eat the ham made out of ham, even though it's not made out of ham.
What's wrong with these people?
Yeah, they're idiots.
Would you rather be lactose intolerant or the Prime Minister of the Central African Republic?
Yeah.
Why is that hard?
Why is that hard? It'd be something, Ed. It'd be something. It would still be Prime Minister of somewhere.
So why is that hard? I'd rather be Prime Minister of the Central African Republic, obviously. Why is that an emergency question?
Some of them are easy, Ed. Some of them are to make people feel good about themselves. I can ask you a random one on the Emergency Questions app, available on Android and iOS. Got to make a living here somehow.
Is there good money in podcast apps?
I think we might have broken even, which in podcast terms is like being a Mrs Brown's Boys. We're investing the 55p we've made.
God, this is quite a good one, actually.
Okay, thank you.
What 266, for those of you who know well, what age do you think you have to be old?
Oh.
Yeah.
That is quite tricky.
I think it changes depending on where Madonna is up to in her life.
You're younger than me, Ed, which confuses me because you're a politician, so you must be older than me. Yeah.
I'm representing youth here on this stage.
You don't really look younger than me, though, so do you?
It's hard to believe. You look a bit like...
I'm not using Grecian 2000.
Well, you look a bit like... Geoff, if you're a little bit fatter especially, you look like you're sort of halfway through the Santa Claus. That's it. You're like Tim Allen on the way.
Thank you.
Well, actually, I'll talk to you about that because your look has changed a lot. I saw some photos of you when you were young, starting out in the radio, and you look a lot different now than you did then, and not just because you're older.
Can you describe what you saw, and I can maybe speak to that?
I mean, you were quite... you were a little chunkier, and you were a bit more sort of Timmy Mallet-esque. A bit more like Timmy Mallet.
I had bleached blonde hair.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That was a terrible decision.
I've never had bleached blonde hair.
No. Give it a go.
I think
you should put a little Put little David Pumpkins in the middle. That's what I'd do.
Yeah.
It's not a euphemism.
Yeah, I just think any time you see a photograph of you from more than 18 months ago, it's just humiliating.
But you've changed a lot. I mean, I think I have as well. But you're quite a stereo.
Just see me as a David Bowie-like figure with all these incarnations. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've been broadcasting for a long time.
And now I'm narrowcasting.
Yeah.
I just feel constantly uncomfortable in my own skin. I'm definitely the most uncomfortable person on this stage, or perhaps in this room. So it's no surprise to me that you would have seen a photograph of me in which I look terrible, because I just think any given photograph of me, I'm going to look terrible.
You look really, you've matured well, I think.
Do you think so?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you. You just said that I look halfway through Santa Claus.
What
about
he's trying to rescue himself, I think.
What's better than being Santa Claus? At least you're halfway through, I didn't say. I mean, if you combine the two of us, we've probably got the lot. No, well, you're big pals with lots of comedians, and you've worked with lots of comedians behind the scenes as well, haven't you?
A little bit. So I started out in radio in South Manchester at the same time as Craig Cash and Caroline Aherne and John Ronson and all these people. And we all got fired off this radio station at a very similar time when it was taken over. So Craig and Caroline gave me a job out of pity. I had a job on the Mrs Merton show, but it was after it had already gone in production, so there were no real jobs for me. So basically, my job was running across to the spa and getting Asti Spumanti and Benson and Hedges for Caroline. That was my actual job, and making sure she was just drunk enough.
It was a pretty amazing show, that, though. And then you worked with Dave Gorman and Chris Addison. You worked with...
Well, Dave was a writer on the Mrs Merton show, and then Chris Addison... We used to go... It's still there. There's a club in Manchester called the Frog and Bucket, which is a comedy club, and you will have played there.
I will. I played there very recently on the...
Me too, actually.
The 12th of November I played recently for the people at home. It went amazingly well, I have to say.
And we all used to hang out there, so we saw Chris Addison do his first ever open mic there, and it used to be a tiny little venue just around the corner, and then they moved to the big sort of smelly saloon that, even though it's been open at this point 20 years, it still smells of vomit. And on the opening night, I turned up, and my ex-girlfriend was there with her new boyfriend, who came over and thought I was looking at him strangely. This is the only time I've ever been in anything approaching a fight. He just punched me in the face because he thought I was looking at him funny.
Yeah.
So my instinct, of course, was to just sort of run backwards. And Chris Addison, friend that he was, in a Manchester comic called Smug Roberts, they grabbed hold of my arms and pretended that they were holding me back. When in actual fact, they were holding me forward.
Holding you back. So the bloke could just punch you repeatedly again and again in the face. You have been on Win, Lose or Draw.
Have, yeah.
How did that go for you? I've done that one.
I'm a big Beatles fan.
Yeah.
And one of the it was everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey.
Oh yes.
And I guessed it before they drew anything. I just guessed it from the
number of words.
Yeah. Which I think is quite
That's
impressive.
good. That's quite good. That makes a short show, though. They're probably annoyed with you. You've got to let them draw something.
I was on that show. I'll tell you who else was on that show that night was Mark Owen of Take That.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought, I felt very sorry for him that his career was going so badly that he would be on the same TV show as I was on, which is a bit how I feel about Ed and yourself to a lesser extent.
That maybe. Would you ever go on? Because I know what it's like to nearly win
No.
stuff. I've been on Celebrity Pointers 3 times and never won it, so I know what you went through with the election. And so I still wake
Same
up
thing.
at night thinking I should have
Celebrity
said Joe
Bake
Dodgy.
Off, Jungle.
Strictly?
I never got offered the Jungle. I got offered the after show of the Jungle. So I was like, no.
But it's done. Ed Balls did well out of whatever was he on Strictly Come Dancing?
Yeah, he did, but he carried it off. It would make the bacon sandwich look positively elegant if I was on Strictly, I think.
The bacon sandwich is.
Oh, I'm glad I brought it up.
It's pretty. No, I'm on your side on this. I think like anyone eating something, if someone's taking 1,000 photos of you eating, you're going to get one where you don't, you've got stuff falling out your face and you look.
Yeah, I shouldn't have sort of.
You shouldn't have eaten a bacon sandwich. You should just go inside when you're eating a bacon
You should
sandwich.
have been an advisor. That's
Yeah.
really.
I'd have gone, Ed, don't eat it.
Yeah, that's pretty sharp of you too.
I'd have said, Ed, throw it on the floor and stamp on it. Jump up and down furiously on it.
Yeah.
Throw it into the crowd.
Unwise.
Did you have any idea at the time there was anything happening, or as far as you were concerned, you
No.
were just enjoying a bacon
I was just
sandwich?
enjoying a bacon sandwich. Unfortunately.
Had you ever eaten a bacon sandwich before?
Believe it or not, I had.
Yeah.
Actually. I know it's hard to believe. What else have you got, Richard?
That's mainly at the Millstone and bacon sandwich. That's the only bad.
But you've not mentioned his 2 kitchens. That's
thanks
the other one of the Holy Trinity.
He's got enough for 2 work surfaces and that sort of
That's what the headstone will be for.
Oh, one of your fans has. You've got lots of young women who are big fans of yours, and one of your fans, I heard on your podcast, has a tattoo of your face on their thigh. Is that right?
Yeah, it was after the election. Yeah.
Right.
I sort of. I was a photo opportunity too far. I didn't. Sort of, it was.
Yeah.
There's no accounting for taste.
Have you seen it, or have you just heard tell?
No. I haven't.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. It's
is rather
very
odd,
permanent,
actually.
a tattoo.
I hope it isn't permanent for her sake. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. It's your fate. It's you eating
know
a
it's
bacon sandwich as well.
You know it's permanent, do you?
Well, tattoos are pretty permanent. I mean, you can get rid of them, but there's always like a little shadow left behind. You have to turn it into something else. It's like, you know, sometimes when neo-Nazis have a swastika, they turn it into something else when they get better.
So what do you think Ed's face would lend itself to being turned into then?
It could be...
I'm trying to work that out, really.
Yeah.
Wallace from Wallace and Gromit.
That's a compliment, actually. Does that make Geoff Gromit? Well, you're more of a grommet, actually.
Yeah, I
come to
probably
think
am.
of
I mean,
it,
I can't talk about anything. Someone tattooed my name on their back when I was in the 1990s.
Hang on, did they just tattoo Richard?
No, Rich. They tattooed my name, Rich Herring, on the back, and I saw her in like about 15 or 20 years later in Paddington Station with her husband and child, and they looked at me in a weird way. Just looked at me. All of them looked at me, and I just went, "Hi."
Was it just your name in Times New Roman or something?
Somebody you knew, or just...
Just someone who liked what we were doing. It was before we were on telly, I think, even.
That is a rash decision.
It's a bit too far, isn't
Rash
it?
decision,
It's a
yeah,
bit too far.
definitely.
It wasn't my face on her thigh.
No.
Put someone else on the other thigh.
Ed Balls.
Yeah. Make you kiss under the mistletoe.
Moving on, Richard. Moving on.
Okay. Good one, I thought.
Yeah.
And
Next page, I think.
I'll ask Geoff something. Oh, you're the second person we've had on who presented Thronecast. In fact, you're the third person we've had on who presented Thronecast.
Really? Who?
We had Rachel Paris on.
Uh-huh.
I haven't yet had the guy Jamie East who replaced you. I felt was quite insulting to you because it was just like you. They replaced you
and better at the job.
Slightly better looking. And then we did have Sue Perkins on.
Right.
Who I feel you and Rachel Paris should be the presenters of Thronecast.
Thank you, me too.
Yeah. You were in the first 3 series before it really they spent any money on it.
Well, it was just on the internet, and then they put it on telly, but didn't spend any extra money on it. And somebody tweeted, and this is the wrap-up show that came after Game of Thrones. They said, trust Sky Atlantic to follow the most expensive programme ever made for television with the cheapest programme ever made for television.
Did you have to learn all the names of the characters? It wasn't so hard back in the first series.
No, I don't envy them now.
Do you know who they all are now? Because I only know that. I can't even think of his name. Ian Greythorne.
I do pride myself on the ability of remembering. I can't remember people's names in real life.
No.
And as you saw before, if I'm introduced to a new person, I always will pretend that I say, "Oh, I think we've met already," because it puts the awkwardness on them, just in case we have already met.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'm good at remembering is the names of the characters in Game of Thrones, unless you have a test in that book.
No, I don't. I used to have a Lannister notebook, but now it's Tiny Rick. Tiny Rick. Yeah.
Didn't get the reaction you were hoping for.
No, it did. I'll ask you this question. If you had to have... You like the Muppets, right?
I do, yeah. I went to... You know my story about that?
No, go on. Tell me the story and then I'll ask you the question.
This is a boring story. I wish I hadn't said my story about that. My wife went to Edinburgh to have a mooch around the comedy festival, so I was left at home with the baby, and I couldn't go out in the evenings because it's frowned upon, leaving an 18-month-old baby unattended. So I would fall down these Google holes. And I saw that the Muppets were playing a live show, and as a fan of the Muppets, I think, when does that happen? Like, I've never heard. It's with an orchestra, and it's going to be the full Muppet Show cast. So I impulse bought a ticket to see them at the Hollywood Bowl, and then had to explain to my wife, "Okay, well, you got to go to Edinburgh for a few days, so I think it's only fair that I get to go to Los Angeles and see the Muppets live."
Yeah. So you went to the Hollywood Bowl?
I did go to the Hollywood Bowl, yeah.
Was it worth it?
Is anything ever really worth it?
Yeah, some things are, but I'm not sure going to the Hollywood Bowl to see some bits of cloth being moved around.
I think because I spent that money, I tell myself it was worth it, because it would be too painful to admit otherwise.
I went to the Furchester Hotel in Salford, which is a story in my show, but that felt like a lot of effort. to go and see some Muppets.
And you met Mr. Tumble as well.
I did meet Mr. Tumble.
You're using your show business connections.
Well, I had to wait in a corridor for Mr. Tumble. I really wanted to meet Rebecca from Let's Play.
Right, yes.
Yeah, she knows what she's doing.
I think, they do the birthdays on CB.
Yeah.
I think if you send in your birthday card and it isn't read out by Rebecca,
yeah.
I think that's the equivalent of going to Buckingham Palace to get your OBE on the day when the Queen isn't there and you have to get it from Prince Andrew or something.
It's true. I think she's a bit scared of me now, Rebecca from Let's Play.
Oh, how did that
Well,
all play out?
because I do a big routine about her and the Third Chester Hotel in my show, and then, the word gets around. It got back to the CB piece. That I was,
And yet you were still allowed.
Well, no, this was afterward. This was after her. I did write about it, and she tweeted me on my 49th birthday to say happy birthday to me, but that was before she realised I was sort of a threat. If you haven't seen the one where she dresses in the tennis outfit, look it up now. It's good. I'm 50 years old. It's all I've got in my life. If you had to have sex with one of the Muppets, which Muppet would you?
Oh, Janice from the band.
Yeah, I like her. Yeah,
very much so.
Same question. You had to. If you were the Prime Minister,
I'd be the Prime Minister of the Central African Republic.
And Vladimir Putin was saying we're going to bomb you with a nuclear bomb unless you have sex with one of the Muppets, and everyone in the country will be dead. Which Muppet would you? And you can have sex with any of them. He's not unreasonable, Vladimir Putin.
Peace talks. I go for peace talks.
Oh, fuck off, Beaker.
The joke wasn't funny the second time.
I was trying to help you out there.
I know, okay.
Avoid answering a question.
Okay.
And the other, well, how was it? Do you remember being the chairman of the HM Treasury's Council of Economic Advisors? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was a sort of glorified title, really.
Yeah. It was quite early on in your career.
I was an advisor to Gordon Brown, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Do you remember the other one I was going to go for was researcher to co-presenter Andrew Rawnsley on A Week in Politics?
Yeah, that was my first job out of university.
Any stories about working with Andrew Rawnsley?
God.
Do you think you work with someone like Andrew Rawnsley, right, and you're just out of university,
right, for the Observer,
and I imagine he's treating you pretty badly, and then
He didn't, he was very nice.
I imagine he's going,
I'm
go
really
make my
sorry.
tea, boy. That's what I'd have been like.
No,
and then you
quite
come back
nice.
and go, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be Prime Minister, Andrew Rawnsley. What do you think about that?
Well, I would have been wrong, wouldn't I?
Yeah, but you would have had that day you could have gone to.
No,
and when I get in...
I'm really sorry, I'm going to be really boring. He was nice. They were nice, sorry.
He does look
Were
nice.
you beastly when you were on the television then?
Yeah, I think I probably was.
Yeah.
I was kind of a monster.
Did you sort of throw things?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I had a friend who did work experience.
That's why I don't work on the TV anymore. No, we were too nice, I think.
Right. I had a friend who did work experience on Watchdog when Vanessa Feltz was doing it, and she had to queue up at the catering for Vanessa's lunch, and she queued up, behind all the crew, and it takes forever, and she eventually gets to the front, gets a plate full of food, takes it over to Vanessa, and Vanessa takes one look at it and goes, "More meat!"
I wish I'd been like that. I found it embarrassing. We found it like people would come. You're on TV, and people would come and say, "Do you want a cup of tea?" And you go, "I just make that's the kettle over. I make my own tea." And they go, "The thing is, it's our job to bring you tea. If you don't do that, we don't have anything to do."
Really, that's quite an important point though about not being too grand.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be. I think in politics it's very easy to become very grand, and to
Of course, yeah.
expect everybody to sort of, fawn around you.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's part of the. There's some study that some university did saying that the more power you have, the less empathetic you are. And like literally some brain effect.
This is why I'm very empathetic.
I think it's important.
Did you notice that happening to you when you were?
Well, I tried not to get into that sort of mindset.
Yeah.
David Cameron didn't quite have the same sort of,
I mean, he started without much empathy, so it would have been hard for him to...
More arrogance, I think.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Well, the stuff I hear about the Bullingdon Club, I mean, I don't know whether he partook of any of it, but yeah. And do you feel sorry for Theresa May, or do you think it's just... Do you find it kind of funny like everyone else does?
What do I feel? I sort of feel like she got the job, and she doesn't. You know, there's lots of things that people can talk about, like the letters falling off behind her on the stage, and the coughing fit, and the man with the P45, and all of that. But actually,
on next week.
But actually, I think the fundamental problem is she doesn't know what she wants to do with the job.
Yeah.
It's actually a deeper problem. Often in politics, you think it's a superficial problem, and it turns out to be a deeper problem. You know, that it's a more fundamental thing about, you know, what's she actually trying to achieve. And I think she did that speech when she became Prime Minister, and she was all like, you know, the country's too unequal, we're going to do something about it, and so on and so forth. And she hasn't really done anything to tackle that in the time that she's been Prime Minister. So I think her fundamental problem is she doesn't really know why she's there.
But it's the same thing we were talking about, where she's obviously been briefed, and you see those interviews where I think I've seen one with you, where you're saying this, you know that there's going to be a soundbite.
Yeah, I did a few of those, yeah.
And so you're repeating the same soundbite over and over again.
The robotic problem.
Yeah. But she did that same thing after the Grenfell Tower thing, which was just horrific, I thought, and just awful. Emily Maitlis, I think, interviewed her, and she'd been there, and she'd been helping out, and she was very emotional about it. And Theresa May didn't get emotional about it, and you almost feel like if you just... the thing you're discovering, if you show your human side, that people are more likely to like you. And I think in that situation, she could have almost, you know, if she...
Well, there's a really interesting question to which to be answered about why, whether it's Theresa May or, you know, what people perceive about me before 2015, why politics prevents humanity. Why does it often seem sort of inimical, or, you know, what is the right word, sort of stopping people showing their humanity, their human side? And it must be caution. People say the same about Hillary Clinton, by the way, and that, you know, since she lost, she's been much more open and so on. And it is quite, you know, it's partly political culture, it's partly media. You know, some people are better at it than others. Mind you, you end up with a Boris Johnson, you know, if you're not careful, which is sort of, you know, who wants that? You know, so it's sort of, so it's how do you get that? And I think one of the things that is a premium in politics is people say authenticity, but I think authenticity is a bit like now a catch-all for sort of, you know, everything. It's more, we were talking about it just backstage, you know, not having the sort of short delay in your, you know, as you're trying to answer the question and trying to be incredibly cool, you know, it's greater honesty, apart from on your emergency questions. But I think that is part, and I think people do want that.
Yeah. Can I talk about your brother for a second? I was
Rob?
No,
Steve.
I was
Steve.
I was behind him in a taxi queue the other day at King's Cross.
Oh right.
He's got really weird shoes.
Can you just add more on the shoes?
He was
sure
wearing
it was him.
Yeah, definitely him. And he
sure
was
it wasn't
wearing.
me.
He definitely wasn't you. He was way too good looking and statesman-like.
Has everybody forgotten about that banana photo? It's like
he had a suit on, but then he was wearing these like slightly casual. I mean, not quite espadrilles, but, you know, there was...
Flip-flops.
It just... I thought, you know...
Really?
What kind of a mess would we have been in if that 50-50 vote that we've had gone the other way?
Shall I pass it on?
Yeah, please tell him.
Right, okay,
he's
fine.
welcome on as a guest any time.
Right, okay. I'm sure that'll be a kind of good hook to get him on.
Yeah.
Richard doesn't like your shoes.
I don't like your
Actually,
shoes.
Richard asked David on as a guest, and Ed got in touch and said, "No, can you have me on instead, please?"
I think there's lots of things. I feel you're treated very unfairly. I think the bacon sandwich, the fact that you're standing for the leader of your party, and because your brother's doing it, you're not supposed to do it. These things aren't fair criticisms, are they?
I slightly think it comes with the territory, though.
I suppose, but I mean, you also.
I mean, in a way, you go into the politics knowing that that's going to be the. I don't sort of think to myself. Obviously, disappointed to have lost the election, but I don't think to myself, "Oh God, it's so awful. Life is so unfair. If only the bacon sandwich." I just. What's the point in operating in that way?
Well, but everyone else is thinking, you know, there's all these moments within the last 10 years. If that had gone the other way, would things have been different? If you'd won the election, would it have gone a different way? I mean, it couldn't have been worse, Ed, could it?
As in,
if you were Prime Minister, it
wouldn't have been worse. I promise
it couldn't be worse.
Well, I wouldn't have had the referendum.
No.
But starting point. But look, in a way, you've got to, history works in funny ways, and you've just got to try and make the best of it.
Yeah.
I honestly, I'm not just saying that. I honestly believe that.
I mean, your podcast's about trying to look at the things getting better, but do you think things are going? I mean, it just feels there's a lot of pessimism, I think, in the country, in the world, and it feels like something terrible could happen.
That was the idea, though. I looked at Brexit and Trump and all this stuff, and I thought, and it was before the election was called, and at that point, Labour looked such a long way from being electable. I thought, God, it's just so depressing if you're progressive.
Yeah.
There must be ideas out there, and that was our starting point. I thought, here's a man who knows about the ideas.
But the one thing I'd say to you, so I was at the Pink News Awards the other week, and there's this phrase, I quoted it on the podcast, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And if you think about the change, you're about the same age as me, a little bit older, if you think about the change on LGBT rights since we were growing up, absolutely extraordinary. And so in a way, people say, oh, everything's worse. We had this guy on who's 87 this week who was the Labour youth officer under Clement Attlee, who was the Prime Minister in 1945. And we said to him at the end, have things got better or worse? And he said, unquestionably better. Now, that isn't to minimise the problems there are in the country, but I sort of think history does bend in a kind of positive way. Mm-hmm. I genuinely do.
And do you think things can fundamentally, I think like those things you're talking about, the thing you're talking about in the first podcast, I mean, for me, things like the penal system where we're sort of punishing people and spending lots of money punishing people, why don't we just do something different? You don't have to lock people up to make them pay for whatever they've done or whether they need to pay for those crimes.
I think one thing that Trump and Brexit and Jeremy's success, much greater success than people expected in 2017, shows is there is a space for these big ideas. Yeah. I think it's not just we're trying to make people feel optimistic irrationally. I think there is a space for big ideas to make the country better. I think people want that. I think that's what I underestimated. Never mind the bacon sandwich and the stone and the kitchens and long list. I think what I underestimated was that people had. I was seen as the sort of moving on from New Labour, the challenge to New Labour, leaving New Labour. And people said, "Oh, he's gone too far away from New Labour and Tony Blair." I didn't go far enough away from New Labour and Tony Blair. Yeah. I didn't do enough to speak to people's sense of a thirst for big things. So I sort of think that's what should make one optimistic.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the other thing that is, we're taking a step, but it feels like America and the UK particularly feel like they're taking a step backwards in some ways. But hopefully that will propel people forwards as well, and that you take that step back and then see how awful it is, and hopefully propel people forwards into the future. But the other thing I'd say to people about this, and it's not meant to sound pious, is politics is too important to be left to politicians. I mean, why did that change on LGBT rights happen in the last 30 years? Not simply because Tony Blair made it happen, he passed laws in his government, but it's also because people said, right, we're not having this anymore. And I think that is really important. I think the sense that movements and people are the things that change things. That's kind of why I think politicians are part of it, but they're not the whole answer. Sure. Well, it's good, wasn't it? It's good what he said then.
From a professional point of view, that would be a good point to leave it.
Good place to end. Yeah. So why don't we ask an emergency question? Ladies and gentlemen, we give a massive round of applause. Geoff Lloyd and Ed Miliband. He should have been Prime Minister.
How'd you like them sky potatoes?